Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get going here. It's been a minute or two afterwards. So a couple housekeeping things. If you have phones, please put them on mute. Certainly fine to have them on, but if you can just please dampen the volume, that would be much appreciated. I do believe afterwards, I believe it's 6 o'clock, buses will start leaving to the offsite party. They load just outside of all those doors, right in the middle of the hallway that head outside the little parking circle. So, and I do believe they start at 6, Joe. Just an FYI. So, what we are here to talk about today is digital transformation and the role of people in digital transformation and the impact of digital transformation on the workforce. If anybody has seen me this week, they know how important this topic is to me. Some of you know that is something I've been thinking about for a very long time because it's critical. I do a lot of work with end users, working through fairly complex problems with them. And as I deal with more of their strategies and their thinking around their business, as I unwind it, I always encounter the people part of it. And usually that is at the root cause of a problem. And the reason why they're wrapped up in this knot of confusion is because they don't want to deal with the people part of it. They just want to work around that because it's really, really hard, as everybody knows in here. People and change associated with people is pretty difficult. So let's start with something I've been starting with as well this whole week. It's really to start to unwind how we get to people from digital transformation. This is ARC's six-faceted look at outcomes associated with digital transformation. And I think it's really important to begin here because if you see that, if you look at digital transformation, the innovation associated with it, with things like the Internet of Things, modern software, use and design platforms, microservices, analytics, and all the data related to that, you see how far it extends out around the value chain. There's no isolated area where digital transformation doesn't exist or can't be applied. And what you see here is it's a very multi-dimensional thing. And as you start to transform, you create impact. And the thing about digital transformation is it has, a lot of value chains are upstream to downstream in terms of effect. Sometimes that you can get an upstream ripple, but digital transformation is really interesting because it's just a continuous line, both directions. So you can have somebody do something to you that you can't foresee that has a massive impact on you. That's the whole concept of future-proofing. And you in turn can do that to others. And it's really important as you consider digital transformation because it has a massive impact on your people and how you prepare them for this continuous change. So that impact, that upstream, downstream shift is really going to require, in my mind, rethinking some of the foundational pillars of how businesses operate. And if you look here, you see as more organizations move across the spectrum of digital transformation relative, to their workforce, what you're going to see is this shift from technology as central to outcomes as central. And what that means is technology, rather than becoming the center of change, it's simply an enabler of outcomes. Rather than that particular driver. In that world, tribal knowledge is completely counterintuitive. And one of the reasons why is that you'll start to see that people are going to have a much better understanding of data, and not just data within their operational area, but data outside of their normal operational area. And they're going to have to understand what to do with that what to do with that data outside of their operational area within the context of their jobs and roles. And another thing to think about that is value, and value associated with your customer is going to dynamically change. So you have to have a much broader view of data and what you can do with it, and you have to be in constant motion in terms of your ability to derive value from that data. So speed and agility they're crucial. Those are the differentiators in terms of digital transformation. So as businesses are digging into things like analytics, they are, as I have mentioned this week, finding some real tough sledding when it comes to success and scalability. And a lot of that, as I have expressed, is because they run into these cultural barriers. So they're having some issues with the ROI. And I think it makes sense because transformation is not just small change. It's something large we're trying to affect, even if we start with a very small instance of it. And as they struggle, folks naturally gravitate towards certain things. As I mentioned, they gravitate toward technology and away from people because technology is easier to understand than a person, frankly. So they'll start to look at transformation and change around data, and they'll focus around data and what they should be doing just with data. Or they'll spend time looking for silver bullets. You see a lot of this at the C-suite level, the shiny object. I need predictive maintenance. So go try that vendor because I heard they're really great. Or they'll try to figure out some vision associated with it, and they'll leave it at that strategic level and never kind of connect it to the operational realities of carrying it out. So they essentially strand their operational people when they tell them, they command them, you shall go do this. And the reality is their operational people are going to struggle with that. And I think all of these things in a measure can kind of help, going through the process of understanding data, understanding technology, figuring out what your vision should be. They're all helpful. But until you deal with people, that's where you're going to run into the problem. Because you're always going to be dealing with symptoms, not the root cause. It's the most, as I mentioned, the most difficult thing to unwind because it is rife with cultural barriers. So, successful organizations really start with this orientation. They ask questions around people and the roles of people and their skills and their purpose and their value. And they really understand, as in asking those questions, that people are the key to solving issues associated with data and a digital world. And the technology, then it becomes much more obvious. It's an enabler. Dan, that's something you and I have actually talked about. And you'll hear about that from him. So here's a high-level view of ARC's maturity model relative to workforce and the impact on the workforce in terms of digital transformation. So just a couple of things. If you're interested in more information around each of those areas and the definitions that I've detailed around them, just come see me afterwards. I'll be more than happy to give you some more information. But the main takeaway, I think, is over the maturation process, you're going to see a pretty dynamic shift. So most people in the organization are not involved in this area, in the education process. It's usually relegated to a very small core team. Sometimes this team's been mandated to take on the role of dealing with these initiatives. Other times it's just these internal champions that are so sick of something being done the same way over and over and over and over again. Then as you move into these phases, pilot and improve, and the first step around identifying core capabilities of digital transformation and transitioning them into standard operating procedure, you're going to find that a lot of digital transformation has a negative effect on your workforce. And that's something you have to prepare for and deal with. And that's just the natural resistance, because machines don't push back, but people do relative to change. And then you'll find that you'll hit a point where people will start to think in terms of creative possibilities relative to digital transformation and data-driven ways of doing things. And they'll really embrace it, and it will become much more positive. So this is a look at that same maturation process relative to the ease and speed of doing that. And I like to sort of compare this to Gartner's hype, whatever they call it. I call this the digital transformation longship of really, really, really hard work. And this is where, a lot of folks are in this area of piloting and improving outcomes. This is the area where you're really starting to see them change what type of organization they are. And it's really tough sledding, because you start to ask people to do very fundamentally different things. And it's not like a light switch. You don't ask them to do it one day and then the next day they go on about their business for the rest of their careers. It's a series of steps where you're redefining roles and possibilities in terms of how you can do business. So you're asking a lot from your people. But you will start to have these competencies become ingrained within your business. And then you're going to start to see a sharp acceleration. And you're going to start to blend them into the organization, extend them across the organization, and you'll find blended skills are a much more valued skill set than say maybe some very deep expertise that you see now. And then you'll use that to transform, where you really have a different orientation around what your business can be. And continuous innovation will become fairly standard. So with that said, I want to get out of the way here and let some folks talk that you want to hear from. So we're going to hear from Dentsply, and Dan's going to take us through what they're trying to do with people relative to digital environments, particularly on the plant floor level. And then we will hear from Jonathan at Rolls-Royce, and he'll talk a lot about collaboration and knowledge management, both locally and globally. And then Lachlan will take us around thoughts around what they're doing with people and buildings that they work in. So it'll really focus on not just customer experience, but worker experience as people go about their jobs. So with that, thank you, and Dan.